St. Louis, a really cool city with so much history and an even better food scene. When I first came here, I'd heard a lot of mixed things about it, but lucky me, I met a really nice guy named Nick who's lived here most of his life, so he offered to take me around. He showed me a lot of stuff, and the video that I did was actually my very first travel video I had ever made. Of course, when I finished it, I showed him, and he said it was a good start, but it didn't really scratch the surface, because there's just so much here to see. But now I'm back, and this time, we're doing it over again. It's so weird. Obviously, when you think of St. Louis, you think of the Arch. Very few things in the entire United States are more iconic than the St. Louis Gateway Arch. I mean, really. I'm from DC, so we have the White House and the Washington Monument. San Francisco has the Golden Gate Bridge, St. Louis has the Arch. It's over 600 feet tall, and it's so tall, in fact, you can actually see it as you're coming in for landing. As touristy as it is, though, you really do need to go see it. And you do need to go to the top. Just make sure you get your tickets online and at least a week or so before you actually go, because they only have so many elevator rides to the top. Now I know what you're thinking, but don't worry. Even if you are afraid of heights, it's really not that bad at all. When you're waiting in line to go to the top, they have a little movie they play that's like the 60s style animation that shows the different things that were going on at the time the arch was first built, and some shots of the arch being built to kind of set the mood. Because believe it or not, you actually ride the same elevators that have been there since the 60s when the arch first opened. And speaking of the elevators, they really aren't elevators. So because the arch is curved, special elevators had to be constructed to get to the top. So it's a cross between an elevator, an escalator, and a Ferris wheel. When you're actually riding it though, you feel like you're in some sci-fi escape pod. Because the elevator goes up and over, it feels kind of like when you're on a roller coaster and you're on that first part where the giant chain starts cranking you up to the top. The biggest thing though is how small it is inside, and when the door opens you really do feel like you're getting into a space capsule. And yes, they do know some people are not good with tight spaces, so don't worry. When you walk into the entrance, they have a replica of the elevator sitting there, so you can see firsthand what it's going to feel like before you actually do it for real. But honestly, the ride to the top is only like 3 minutes. The only thing missing is some of that snazzy 60s elevator music, but don't worry, I got you covered. Okay, so quick history lesson. Back in the 1800s, when the states were taking shape, a lot of times they would use natural formations like rivers and mountains to draw up the boundary lines between the states, and the Mississippi River was a big one. So, when you get to the top of the arch, you'll see there's 2 sets of windows to look out of, one facing Missouri, one facing Illinois. Because the arch stands right next to the line between Missouri and Illinois, if you look out the window and see the Mississippi River, that's the Illinois side you're looking at, and the side with the courthouse is Missouri. Now you see why they call it the Gateway to the West, because at the time, the United States west of the Mississippi really hadn't been established and explored, and during what they called the westward expansion, when everyone decided to leave the super crowded cities and head out into the wide open west, St. Louis was the last major stop to stock up on supplies and things you'd need before you're off into the emptiness of the western US, where you're pretty much on your own. I mean, even now, if you look at a map of the US, you can see where the lights pretty much stop and the boundary to the west begins. That's why the arch is the arch, because they wanted something to serve as a symbol of walking through a gateway to the western US without it feeling like a boundary line cutting the country in half. So now you know. So this one time I was in Wyoming visiting a place called Devil's Tower, and I ended up going in the visitor center and striking up a conversation with the park ranger. When I told her that I travel all the time and I wanted to start a YouTube channel, she recommended me this book called See America. And the cool thing about this book, it's like a collection of different national parks and monuments, but when you go to these places, you get passport stamps from the visitor center. So obviously the goal is to get as many pages as you can and try to fill the book up. I'm about 2/3 of the way done, so I still have a few to go, but after today, the Gateway Arch, done. So one of my favorite spots in St. Louis is called the Del Mar Loop, and it's this stretch of Del Mar Boulevard that it's like stepping back in time. I mean, you've got all these old buildings on the sides of the street, you have the tracks where the old trolley cars used to go up and down the streets, and the cool thing that they do in Del Mar, that they actually do in all of St. Louis, they don't tear down their old buildings. They want to preserve the way St. Louis looks, and they want to preserve that historical aesthetic that they have. So instead of tearing down old buildings and building new ones, they just repurpose the buildings. So you might be in a clothing store that used to be a hotel, or you might be in a restaurant that used to be a bank. And speaking of bank turned restaurants, there is one place you have to go on Del Mar. It's called Fitz's. 3 words: root beer floats. At Fitz's, they do it for real. Not only do they come in a huge beer mug, not only do they make their own root beer in-house where you can actually watch it being bottled, not only do they put like 3 huge scoops of ice cream so it ends up being like a skyscraper root beer float, but they have different types of floats. Literally an entire page in their menu of nothing but different types of floats, and not all of them even have root beer. They actually have several different flavors of soda that they all make from scratch. When I took my mom, she got one called the Cherry Bomb. Cherry soda, vanilla ice cream, whipped cream, and of course, a cherry on top. One thing you have to know though when you eat this thing is there is a certain way to eat it to keep it from melting all over the place and making a total mess on the table. As much as I love St. Louis, this city is just so overwhelming, especially if it's your first time. There is just so much to see and do, and no matter how much you actually get around to doing, you never feel like you even scratch the surface of this place. I mean, this city is so full of history everywhere you go, from the park that was used for the 1904 World's Fair to the original donut shop that's been opened by the same family since the 1904 World's Fair. Street after street of old Victorian houses, the iconic old courthouse that's actually the exact courthouse built in 1816 and was the courthouse that the Dred Scott case was tried in, and still has the original stone floors and courtrooms. There's the Chess Hall of Fame, where there's literally an entire street of chess-themed things like the Kingside Diner, which by the way does an awesome breakfast. You can spend a couple hours playing some chess on the giant chessboard, right next to the world's largest chess piece. And then there's the City Museum. It's an old shoe factory that was bought and turned into something in the ballpark of half quirky interactive museum, half indoor fun park. It's catered just as much to adults as it is to kids too, so people of all ages will love this place. Random, and I mean random, things to see and explore all over the place here. I mean, come on, how many places let kids go down a slide coming out of a dinosaur's ass? They even have a 10-story slide, and yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. A spiral slide that runs from the 10th floor all the way down to the bottom. An old jet airliner you can actually go inside and play around in. A couple of restaurants that serve beer and cocktails, and this one has a stage where they do live shows. And yes, that's actually the largest pair of underwear in the world. An old school pinball arcade, the old Pac-Man and Galaga games. This place just has so much stuff to see. They even have an old bank vault from one of the oldest banks in St. Louis that you can actually walk through. And if you want to see my favorite part of this whole place, pay the extra money for the rooftop pass, because there's a whole other thing going on up there. They have a Ferris wheel on the roof that you can actually ride on. Climb up the famous giant praying mantis and then slide back down. And make sure you go sit in the driver's seat of the bus that hangs off the side of the building. Apparently, it used to be just balanced off the edge there under its own weight until one day it almost tipped and fell off the building. There was a whole citywide emergency, and even though it's secured to the roof now, you can actually still feel it moving and bouncing around. And even though I am terrified of heights, I still did it. This place is so big we could actually see the rooftop shenanigans from our hotel. A little outside of the city is St. Charles, and it's something straight out of a time machine. It actually used to be the capital of Missouri, and the real attraction here is Main Street. Cobblestone streets, the original buildings from over 150 years ago, tons of shops, cafes, restaurants, and when I took my mom for Christmas time, they had the entire town decorated like a Charles Dickens village, complete with people dressed in period costumes acting out the Ebenezer Scrooge story. Even carolers who walk around singing Christmas carols. The one mistake I think everybody makes when they come to St. Louis, though, is that they focus so much on seeing the Arch and all the other sites, they miss out on probably the best and most overlooked thing St. Louis has to offer: food. Your body may be a temple, but mine is a food court. In St. Louis, where do I even begin? The food scene here is absolutely endless. The amount of restaurants, diners, and bars in this city would take months to go through, but ask anyone here, there's a definite list of places you cannot leave without hitting. And since St. Louis was the site of the 1904 World's Fair, there are all kinds of foods that were invented here. First on that list is the slinger. There is no breakfast more St. Louis than a slinger. Potatoes topped with a hamburger patty, topped with eggs, topped with homemade chili, topped with cheese and onions. Holy sh**. A lot of people told me Mudhouse had the best slinger, but I personally think the best one I had was at Courtesy Diner, which just happens to be the oldest diner in St. Louis. Ever had toasted raviolis? Possibly the most popular food local to St. Louis. It was born and raised here. I've had it in other places, but it started here, and just about every bar in St. Louis has it. Back on Del Mar is Blueberry Hill, the classic St. Louis hole-in-the-wall bar where Chuck Berry got his start. It's got a really cool atmosphere. It's a great place to play darts, get some local beers, try some fried pickles. They actually have a whole late-night menu here that is really good. Ah, Emo's Pizza. St. Louis-style pizza is all about the cheese and the crust. It's thin like a cracker, but it's chewy like Brooklyn style, and it's made with a cheese you can only get in St. Louis called Provel. It's a mix of cheddar, Swiss, and provolone. And St. Louis-style pizza is always cut into squares. Oh man. Crown Candy Kitchen. Oldest soda fountain in St. Louis. Half restaurant, half homemade candy shop. home of the heart-stopping BLT. Notice how all the sandwiches on the menu are less than $10, but then the BLT is like $14? Yeah, that's because it comes with a pound of bacon. And they have a malted milkshake challenge. If you finish 5 of their full-size malted milkshakes in 30 minutes or less, you get your name on their wall of fame, and it's free. Remember those World's Fair classic foods I was telling you about? Definitely the most St. Louis of them all, gooey butter cake. It was created on accident in the 1904 World's Fair when a baker accidentally doubled the butter in his cake recipe. Instead of throwing it away, he decided to try and sell it and see what people thought, and once they tasted it, he couldn't make enough to keep up with the demand. Trust me, you'll see. Barbecue in St. Louis is no joke. The St. Louis-style barbecue is sweet, smoky, tangy, black on the outside, and full of flavor. Salt and smoke takes the trophy. Do not leave St. Louis without eating here. If you're not a fan of the heavy diner food, a really good spot to get a nice breakfast is Rooster. They have a whole bunch of stuff on their menu that's not the classic diner stuff, and wow, they have incredible crepes. But make sure you get here early because this place will be packed. Okay, so remember Fitz's, that place that used to be a bank that does the root beer floats? Well, right off I-64 is an old warehouse that's what I like to call a flea market of food. It's called Food Hall, and inside is just like I said, it's like a flea market of food. Almost like a food truck park, but without the trucks. They have a little bit of everything here, so you can just walk around and go to town. One last place I'll mention is 100% a St. Louis icon. Ted Drew's is this ice cream stand that opened in 1931 and has been busy ever since. They're known for their concretes, soft serve blended with mix-ins, and if you flip it upside down and it falls out, it's free. They have every flavor imaginable in spring, summer, fall, even in the dead of winter. This place is packed. So it's kind of become a St. Louis tradition of mine that every time I come visit, on my last day here, I pack my stuff up, get checked out of the hotel, grab something to eat, and then on the way to the airport, I stop at the cathedral. And you know, the cathedral is one of those places, it's so overlooked in St. Louis that most people probably would never even know to go there. And if you've ever been to France, you know that they are crazy about their churches and their cathedrals. I mean, they decorate these things inside and out. The architecture is just gorgeous, and there's so much to see. And because St. Louis used to be a French city, the one in St. Louis is just like the ones in Paris. If you do decide to visit it though, just remember that it is still an active church, and so there are going to be people probably praying and meditating, and sometimes they even hold a Catholic Mass in the middle of the day. So just be quiet and be respectful if you go there. It's not a theme park, it's a church. And even though I'm not religious, it's still just an absolutely gorgeous place to see, and it's always a perfect end to a great visit. I meant what I said earlier when I said this city is overwhelming, because every time I come here I always leave feeling like I never saw enough stuff, but I realized it's just that St. Louis has so much to see. It's just honestly endless. St. Louis is really a special place with so much here to love. The people who are from here are very proud to be from here, and it definitely shows. Even though St. Louis has a really bad reputation, the people here love their city. You will always come here with a list of things to do, and you'll leave with an even bigger list for next time. Everybody has always been super friendly, and they make you feel so welcome here. They genuinely want you to enjoy their city. And as many other cities as I've been to, I can honestly say there really is no other place quite like St. Louis. That's it for me for now. Thanks for watching.